Alright, so in this video I'm going to go over everything I read in March. There was 7 books that I read. I'm going to pick out my book of the month, then I'll talk about my April TBR, everything I want to read in April. And then I'm going to talk about a couple other booktubers that I've been watching recently, and then just wrap up the video. So let's get right into it. And all of these books that I read, the 7 books, I did video reviews of all of them, and I will post links down in the description if you want to check out the full video reviews of all these. So the first book I read was Dorsai by Gordon R. Dickson, and this is some good old classic military science fiction. It was a little different than I thought. It was more tactical than, boots on the ground fighting. The characters were pretty good. You got the idea that they couldn't lose, basically, some of the main characters, but it was very entertaining, and it was a quick, easy read, and I liked it enough to where I want to keep reading some more of the Dorsai novels, because I forget how many there are. There's a bunch of them, and I do have the second one, so at some point I'm going to read that. The next book I read was Empire of Two Worlds by Barrington J. Bailey. And this was the first book I read from Bailey, and it was good. He's a really good writer. This was a very dark, grim book, but it was very unique, very interesting, and I definitely want to read more from Bailey in the future. All right, then was The Paradox Men by Charles L. Harness. This one really blew me away. I didn't have many expectations for this book. I hadn't really heard many people talk about this when they're talking about classic science fiction. It was written in 1949, and I absolutely loved it. It reminded me a lot of Alfred Bester's 2 most known works, The Star's My Destination and The Demolished Man, but this was written before that, and it actually has likable main characters, so it was really good. Really, really good. And then this book, The Best of Lee Brackett, this one, me and Matt from Science Fiction Reads and Richard from Vintage SF all read this, and then we did a video on Matt's channel. So if you haven't seen that, I'll post a link to Matt's channel where we all discussed Lee Brackett and that book. Okay, next was Ian M. Banks' Player of Games. And this was the first Ian M. Banks book I ever read, and this one blew me away too. Really enjoyed it. It's one of those books that after you've read it, the experience of reading it for the first time and getting some of the plot twists, and it was the first culture novel I read, so all of it was just really good. Really, really enjoyed that. Okay, then was Neuromancer by William Gibson. This was a challenging read for me. I'd tried to read it a couple times and finally clicked with me. I finally enjoyed it. It does take a lot of work. I do want to read the sequels at some point. I gushed a lot about William Gibson kind of, being the most well-known face of cyberpunk. And I got a lot of really good comments on that video. And one really good comment I got was someone, and I'll put it right here maybe, someone recommended a James Tiptree Jr. story, and I had this short story collection of James Tiptree Jr., which we all know, I think, is Alice Sheldon, and she wrote this story in here called The Girl Who Was Plugged In. So I took a little break and I read this one. It wasn't very long, and wow, it was something else. It definitely makes me want to read more James Tiptree Jr. I think I've read about 4 of her short stories, but this one was very unique. I definitely got this cyberpunk element, even though, there was bits and pieces of what we all think of as modern, like William Gibson cyberpunk, but it was a really, really good book, or a short story, and if you have a copy of that anywhere and you haven't read it, give it a read. It's really, really fascinating. So, and then the last book I read for the month was A Choice of Gods by Clifford D. Simic. And this was the 6th Clifford Simic book that I've read, and I just always like his writing. It's just, I had read some kind of darker books over the month and kind of needed a palate cleanser in a way. He always has some, just a nice take. He's never really trying to piss anyone off in his writing, and I don't know, I just really like him as an author. So now to pick my book of the month, I was kind of torn between A Player of Games and The Paradox Men, but I'm going to have to give it to The Paradox Men. This book just kind of came out of nowhere for me, and I'm a huge Alfred Bester fan. I don't know how I never even really heard about this book or got recommended it, but it's part of this series I'm doing, so I was just kind of picking some random books, and I decided to pick this one up, and I think it's kind of a forgotten classic, and so hopefully I can bring a little bit more attention to it. And Charles L. Harness, I don't think he wrote a ton, but there's a couple other books that some commenters recommended that I'm definitely on the lookout for. So with March out of the way, let's get into what I'm reading in April. So the first book I've already started, Venus of Dreams by Pamela Sargent. I actually have the ebook on this. I got it a long time ago. It's actually a compilation ebook of all 3 books in the trilogy, which is like somewhere around 1,500 pages. It's kind of disheartening when you're on an ebook and you're reading for hours and it only goes up like 1% or 2%, but that's the whole trilogy. I'm making my way through it. I'm like it a lot so far. It's very engaging. I'm always wanting to pick it up. So that'll be the next review video that I come out with. And then there's an event going on. I forget exactly who's kind of hosting this event or putting it on, but it's something about adventure in April. And Sean D. Standfast is one of the hosts. And he talked about, I think in the second week of April, they're going to read She by H. Rider Haggard. And this is also on this list of the masterpieces of science fiction that I'm going through. And so I thought, what better time to read it than in the month of Adventure April when some other people are going to be reading it and talking about it. So that'll probably be around the same time as that little event that's going on. And then I also want to read Beyond Apollo by Barry N. Malzberg. I still have yet to read anything from Malzberg besides, some short stories. So I want to give that a go. This is one that I really want to read this month, The High Crusade by Paul Anderson. And if you know about the premise of this book and you can read the back, it just sounds kind of wild and pulpy and crazy. And so I'm really excited to read that. The next read-along that I'm doing with Matt at Science Fiction Reads and Richard at Vintage SF is The Best of Frederick Brown. So we'll be reading this short story collection, and then the video will be on my channel. I'll be the host of this one. And that'll be kind of more towards the end of the month. And then if I have time, I want to read If the Stars Are Gods by Gregory Benford and Gordon Eklund. And looking up this a little bit, I think this was more of a novella or a short story, and they expanded it into a pretty short novel. It's only 200 and some pages. It doesn't have the best reviews, but the concept of it is just kind of, I'm curious about that. So that's what I want to try to read in April. And next I want to talk about, this is something I saw John from Sci-Fi Scavenger do. He does these weekly kind of wrap-up videos, and he talks about some YouTubers he's watching or maybe a specific video. And I think it's a really good idea to kind of, maybe showcase some other channels or expose some other YouTubers out there, because when you're starting a channel, or even if you've had one for a while, sometimes it's hard to get yourself out there. It's hard to market it and all that. So a newer channel that's probably going to explode is Jake from Pulp Mortem. And if you haven't checked this guy out, he's doing some really awesome stuff with, you know, more on the pulpy, absurd side of the spectrum. But his videos are just great. He throws a lot of humor into them. He'll call authors out for some of the weird things they're doing, and it's just the way he presents the videos are just a lot of fun, and they're very entertaining. So check him out if you haven't. And then Joseph over at Joseph Reads Books. Been interacting with him a lot. We've had a lot of good conversations. He reads all over the spectrum from nonfiction to fantasy and science fiction and beyond that. And he talks a lot about all sorts of books and bookish things on his channel. But it seems like we have a lot of the same taste when it comes to science fiction, and we've been kind of recommending books to each other, and it's been good. So go check him out too if you get time. And that's about it for this video. We'll see you in the next video.